Bass fishing in the month of August can be very difficult. So these are the top 5 lures that I have with me every time. Starting with number 1, the punch rig. Now a punch rig is really just a heavily weighted Texas rig. I would say most of the time I am using 3/4 ounce weight and heavier, all the way up to 2 ounces, but kind of where I live is between that ounce an ounce and a half. Now, as the name implies, I'm using this heavy punch rig to punch through cover to get to where the bass are. You're going to have a lot of bass that are in deeper offshore structure during the month of August, but the bass that are still up shallow tend to seek out the heaviest cover that they can find. And one of the number 1 reasons that they do this is because that heavy cover provides a lot of shade, which also provides a little bit cooler water for the bass. Also, if you find this heavy cover, it's typically home for a ton of different marine life. You will find a lot of bluegills and minnows and small baby bass and all kinds of life in this heavy cover. Now, when I talk about heavy cover, a lot of times I'm referring to vegetation of some sort. You know, this could be hydrilla or coontail or milfoil that has pushed up into an area. And one of my favorite types of heavy cover is what I call a chopped grass mat. This is actually something that I learned a lot from watching Mikey Balls Fishing, one of my favorite YouTubers out there. And you know, a lot of times during the middle of summer, you will have a lot of grass that gets chopped off by boat propellers or the wind, whatever it may be, and it will push up into certain areas. It will collect in certain areas, and it gets so thick that you need that heavy weight to be able to punch through it to where the bass are. Now, the thing is when it gets really thick, it will kill out everything that is below it because there's no sunlight that is penetrating through that mat. And that is where you will find, at times, schools of bass underneath these matted vegetation canopies. Now, mats don't only occur with vegetation, but sometimes you will find certain lakes where debris, some logs and brush will actually float into different pockets and will create kind of a similar situation, but with wood instead of vegetation. So I use a punch rig a lot during this time of the year. Now, something that's really important to understand about punching is the hook set. The hook set is the number 1 thing that will either make or break your day. Because you're using such a heavy weight on this Texas rig, what happens a lot of times is when you set the hook on a fish, that big weight will actually pop a bass's mouth open enough where that hook can slide through that bass's mouth without getting hooked. And the biggest time that this happens is when you really set the hook hard, and especially if you slack line fish on the hook set. If you drop slack in the line and really pop that line hard, that is when you will miss a lot of fish. Now, I spent 5 weeks down in Florida literally punching the majority of the time, and this is where I really learned this a number of years ago. But the hook set with a punch rig is really just what I call a tight line pull, where I'm gonna make sure that my line is tight to that fish and I'm just going to sweep back kind of swiftly, and that seems to be the best hook set. And that's the one that hooks up with fish and allows you to get them out of the cover. Now, it can be very hard to do that because a lot of times a punch bite is explosive, as weird as that sounds, because you will punch through a mat, and as soon as it gets below the mat, you will feel a big bam, a big knock, because a lot of times those fish are sitting just below that mat, and as soon as it falls through that mat, the fish nails it, and it can be like a big bite. And so I know for anglers that may be like myself, it is hard at times not to set the hook hard because you just get all this energy that flows through your body all of a sudden. So make sure that you have a tight line pull set, because otherwise you are going to miss a lot of fish. Now, the other really important part of your punch rig is a snell knot. You really want to make sure that you are snelling your hook on. With a punch rig, I'm going to use braided line to a straight shank hook, And if you use a snell knot, it's just another thing that is going to help increase the number of hookups that you get. And when it comes to fishing vegetation, it's all a percentage game. If you can be 5% better at one angler with this and 5% better than one angler with that, you're going to catch a lot more fish throughout the course of a day. Now, there is a number of different soft plastics that you can use on your punch rig. I typically like something that is a lot smaller than my normal flipping and pitching setup during this time of the year, and that's simply to help get that bait to go through that mat a little bit easier. That just allows you to be more efficient out there on the water. Now, speaking of lure and tackle, this video is brought to you by Omnia Fishing. Not only can you get all of your tackle at Omnia, but Omnia is really just a great resource for the bass fishermen to go out there and catch more fish. Now, when I go to a new body of water, one thing that I love to look at is simple fishing reports. And on Omnia, you can look at all of these different fishing reports from the lakes that you're about to fish. And it can really kind of give you an idea of how the lake sets up. I also really love my Omnia Pro app because the Pro app has topographical maps for over 44,000 lakes across America. And you can actually use different layers, you know, wind layers and vegetation layers to lay across these maps to really help you dial in a body of water a lot quicker. So I'm gonna leave a link down below in the description for all the Omnia tools that you can use. Check them out. They really help support this channel. Now, lure number 2 is a drop shot. A drop shot is one of my absolute favorite baits to fish throughout the entire year, but I use it a lot in the month of August. And there's a lot of anglers that still kind of think a drop shot is simply a vertical technique where you are dropping down on fish that are below you. But most of the time when I fish a drop shot, I am casting this bait out. And the other thing about drop shotting is that you can fish it in clear water and in muddy water. You can fish it in deep water and in shallow water. It is a very versatile bait and it catches bass in some of the toughest, most highly pressured conditions that you are going to face. Now, like I said, a drop shot is very versatile, so you can kind of fit it to the needs that you are fishing. For example, you can fish a drop shot on really heavy line with a bait caster. This is what we call a power shot or a Bubba shot. And I like to do this a lot during the month of August when I'm fishing outside grass lines. A lot of these different lakes that have milfoil in them or coontail or hydrilla, whatever it may be, a lot of times bass are going to be relating to those outside grass lines that you can see with your own eyes. Now, you could fish a finesse technique in there, but sometimes I like to flip up into the grass with a small power shot of some sort. And I will fish this on 15, 18, 20 pound line. So never think that a drop shot is just a finesse rig. Now, it definitely excels when it comes to finesse fishing. And one of the most important things that I have found about finesse fishing with a drop shot during the month of August is that leader length, which is the length of line between your hook and your weight, can really be more important than we think. I have seen a lot of times during the month of August where longer leaders will actually help you to catch more fish. And the biggest reason is that if you go idle your different lakes, or if you look underwater at a lot of bass during this time of the year, you will see a lot of fish that are suspended off the bottom. Now, sometimes it's not that they're suspended 6, 7, 8 foot off the bottom. It's simply that they're suspended 2 foot off the bottom, and they're just not with their bellies on the bottom. And so having a longer drop shot really kind of puts that bait up there in front of their face or above their head, and that really helps you to get more bites. There's a tournament I fished just a couple of years ago where if you were fishing an 18-inch leader, you were gonna catch nothing. If you were fishing like an almost 30-inch leader, you caught a ton of fish, okay? It was literally a humongous difference. So it's very important to pay attention to your leader length during this time of year. Now, when it comes to soft plastics that you're going to use on a drop shot, there is a number of different drop shot baits out there, and all of them can be really, really good. But one of my favorite things to use is just a simple straight tail worm. It catches largemouth, spotted bass, smallmouth bass. It catches them with that heavy power shot. It catches them with a really finesse rig. So I use a robo worm a lot. A robo worm 6-inch fat worm is probably one of my favorite, especially in that margarita mutilator color. So in the month of August, pick up a drop shot. Now, lure number 3 is a deep diving crankbait, and more specifically, a silent version of a deep diving crankbait. I've seen that in the month of August and leading into September, there's kind of a resurgence of a deep diving crankbait bite. Now, the reason that I say resurgence is because it seems like when bass first get to their offshore structure and cover, you know, in the month of May and June, a deep diving crankbait is a great tool for us as anglers to go out there and cover water and catch a lot of bass. But it seems like this tends to die off. As a lot of anglers are picking up deep diving crankbaits and catching fish, the bass simply just get used to that noise that a deep diving crankbait makes, or even the look of a deep diving crankbait. So it seems like, you know, in the end of June and into July, there's a lot of guys that have put down the deep diving crankbait and they're picking up, you know, their finesse gear or whatever else it may be. But in August and in September, when things are tough, I think that a deep diving crankbait can be a great way to cause a reaction strike. Now, with that being said, I think that a lot of times, most of the time, you need a silent crankbait to do this. I think that the ones that have a lot of rattles, those bass are still kind of put off to that vibration, put off to that noise that they've heard so much throughout kind of the early part of the summer. So I fish a silent version of a deep diving crankbait a lot this time of the year. Now my favorite deep diving crankbaits are the Strike King 5XD and the Strike King 6XD. Really anything in the XDs of the Strike King versions. I love them. I've used them a lot. I use the silent versions a lot. They are a fairly inexpensive crankbait, which is really great for the pocketbook, and they just catch fish. Now, like I said, when it comes to that deep diving crankbait, you're gonna be causing a reaction strike. And so what I found to be best is really ripping that bait this time of the year, making long casts, and I mean absolutely cranking that bait as fast as you can. If you're getting that bait down and you're just trying to creep it across the bottom, I think that the bass get too good of a look at that bait and they don't want to bite it. But if you are ripping that thing across the bottom and it hits the bottom, it hits a rock, it hits a stump, deflects off, a bass, you are literally causing an innate reaction from a bass to strike a bait. And so ripping a crankbait during this time of the year is something that I love to do, and I always pick up a silent version. Now, lure number 4 is a spy bait. Now, I think that there's a lot of anglers that think that a spy bait is only good for smallmouth. And guess what? It is great for smallmouth. There's no doubt about it. But if you are dealing with clear water of any sort, whether you're fishing for smallmouth, largemouth, or spotted bass, I really feel like a spy bait is one of the best options that you can fish during the month of August. And one of the biggest reasons is that a spy bait has a tremendous amount of drawing power during the month of August. Bass will see it and they will come from a large distance away. I mean, 10, 12, 15, 20 foot away to hit one of these little baits. And I don't know exactly what it is about a spy bait that has such a great drawing power, but I have seen it time and time again that the bass will eat this thing and they will come from a distance to hit it. Now, although spy baiting is not a new technique, it's still a technique that I think a lot of anglers just don't have a lot of experience in. And the best thing about this technique is it is super easy to fish. It's one of the few lures out there that I'm just going to cast out and reel back in at kind of a slow to medium pace. Now, I have used a lot of different spy baits over the last 8 years, and I have really found that I fish the Spin Bait 80 by Duo Realis a lot. Those Duo Realis baits, there's just something about them. They were one of the originals when it came to spy baiting, and it just seems like they got that bait right. And when it comes to color of a bait, I'm usually going with some sort of translucent color. Again, I typically fish spy baits in pretty clear water, and I don't want the bass to get a really good look at that. So using a translucent bait, a bait that you can see through, really helps with your hookups on a spy bait. Now, lure number 5 is probably one of all of our favorites, and that is a frog. Like I said earlier, when I was talking about punching, you have a lot of matted vegetation. You have a lot of scum mats that are starting to develop during this time of year. And one of the most efficient lures, one of the best lures to use, and one of the most fun lures is a frog. Now, I did a video a couple months ago all about the best lures that I use for bank fishing, where I talked a little bit more about a frog. And so I'm gonna leave that linked right up here for you guys to check out next. I think if you like this video, you'll like that one as well. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you in the next one.